Okay. And we're live.
We are live.
Woo.
We are live. It's so weird in the new studio. You never know when we're live. Yeah, we are live. Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Nadelko.
And I'm Stacey DeSantis.
It's been a while since she's been on. She's going away on vacation next week, so
I'm already on vacation.
she's already mentally out.
Yeah. Producer
Yes.
Matt, as always.
And?
I said producer
Oh,
Matt,
you
as
did. I
always.
missed that.
Yes,
Sorry,
I
I
did.
missed that.
It's all good.
Welcome to episode 86 of Live at the Hive, which we should probably stop. Well, we're going to start putting these out as podcasts next week.
Yes. That's
So
right.
we have to do them, I guess, in some sense of order. So, but this is episode 86 of Live at the Hive.
Yep.
So 14 more and we're at 100.
That's
gonna be a big one.
Pretty big one.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So tell us where you're going on vacation quickly, Stacey.
I'm going up near Sudbury to a place called Grundy Lake, and I'm going to be camping, not glamping. Camping.
Actual camping.
Actual
Very
camping
good.
in a
Thunder
tent.
Bay. Yeah, sounds like fun.
It's
That's
the
the
way
kind
to
of
do
I don't. Well, sometimes I go glamping
Yeah.
Yeah.
with the kids, but
Yeah.
that's with the bowler. But I do my trip
Yeah.
every year, so good stuff.
Yeah,
Exciting.
I'm totally going to disconnect and just me, the lake, kayaking, tent.
Talk to trees, things like that.
Exactly.
So let's do a 180 and talk about what's happening in the world of digital marketing, because
There's
we are not
lots.
unplugging.
Lots of going on
Yes.
with the world of digital marketing. So the first up, we're going to be talking about YouTube, and YouTube's adding some more ways that people can generate revenue on their platform, and they're really starting to push things for live streaming. I know right now Twitch is one of the biggest live streaming platforms out there.
I hear you. You got the monitor on. Yeah, there you go.
There we go. We're good. So Twitch is one of the largest, if not the largest, live streaming platform. So YouTube's really wanting to try and get in there and get their foot in the door. So they've added a bunch of new like stickers, memberships, boosts, things like that to kind of entice people to use their platform, to entice creators to, you know what, like, yes, there's this larger platform that everyone's on, but why don't you come over to us, because you're gonna have your YouTube channel there, so you're kind of syndicating it all into one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things about, YouTube is by no means small.
No.
But they've had a start and stop adoption with their live streaming platform. YouTube Gaming, they broke out YouTube Gaming. I think they rolled it back again. I think what they're doing is they're trying to find the right actual mix of what a live streamer, what's needed for live, and how does that work with my channel? Because they certainly have the lion's share of content creators.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
for sure. I don't know. I almost feel it's like YouTube and Facebook is kind of becoming a little bit of a cage match too, because they're both trying to amp up their live stream game a bit. And I know, like for social, I primarily look at live streaming on like Instagram or Facebook before YouTube, but YouTube is like the OG at the same time, right? So
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, YouTube is magnitudes the size of Mixer or Twitch, even with Amazon behind Twitch. So, it makes sense that this is very much a way for Google to react to the competition that Microsoft is putting down and Twitch is putting down, in particular Mixer in the world of live streaming, if you're talking about this. But here's the interesting thing. They do have some video game screenshots here, but they're also talking about everybody else in the world that would live stream. Like, for example, one of the biggest segments that does live stream are actually churches, and they have been for a very long time.
really, I did not know that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Learning something new.
Churches, one of the largest actual group of live streamers is a vertical around and have been for many, many years. So, yeah, certainly interesting to watch. And again, this is just interesting in terms of watching your own YouTube strategy that you're using. We are going live to YouTube right now, I believe.
Yeah.
Should be. So definitely something to keep your eye on, and some good features there if you're looking at live streaming in terms of donation subscriptions and other.
They're also tying in merch there too.
Yep.
Like your kind of channel merch, whatever you have, you can tie it into the donations and stuff.
Yeah.
Which is kind of
I think one of the other good
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Because when I was first looking at this article, I was kind of like, why would I want to pay $5 for that emoji? But if you put it in like a donation angle with it.
Yeah.
I guess that makes a little bit more sense. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think at the end of the day, this is when competition becomes good, right? Because when YouTube had no real competitor that was kind of pushing them, they control all of the revenues. They control the revenue streams and the revenue splits and the revenue breakdowns. And Google is notorious for keeping quite a large amount of every dollar that is spent somewhere within their ecosystem. So hopefully that's going to get a little downward pressure for everybody else that's working on creating content and content creators in general. So very cool stuff.
Very nice. All right, next up, Pinterest is unveiling new video capabilities for brands to use. So businesses on the platform will now have a dedicated tab for video content and updated video uploader as well. So a bunch of new stuff, which is excellent.
I feel like this is like the video killed the radio star episode because there's lots of video pieces, but yeah, that's pretty cool. I was reading on here too that video content tends to last longer on the feed with Pinterest as well. Like it gravitates more. What were they saying? I think like 31% increase in searches for inspirational videos. So more people are looking for that content, right? So.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things is that, the internet is video. Like it's strongly becoming that way where you're consuming all this video content. If you look at what stories are and you look at where things are going, it's a visual medium. I now have this Android where I can watch TV, like actual TV on my phone. So now I, wake up in the morning and I lie in bed and listen to the news. I don't have to get, So, the interesting thing, I mean, that first animated GIF that's on that article is just shockingly looking at how closely everything is starting to look like each other. That's a little Instagram.
Yeah, that looks very Instagram. That's for sure.
Yeah. And fundamentally one of the things I think we're rolling this out for a few of our e-commerce clients is Pinterest is often not as well thought of initially when people talk about their strategy. They're talking about They're talking about Instagram and Facebook and Google Ads. Yep. And there's a huge opportunity within Pinterest. And Pinterest can be a very silent monster for quality traffic.
Absolutely. Yeah. One of our clients that we work with, it's a huge driver for them to, visit on their website, because you got to think whether you're planning a big family event like a wedding or a home repair. A lot of people go there for that inspiration, then basically kind of lay out what they want to do. So it's a great tool for that.
I think this is a really good time if you have an Instagram account that's really big and you get a lot of engagement on. I think this is a really good time to maybe start taking some of your bits of top content and start placing them on Pinterest. Just to kind of, you know what I mean? It just makes sense right now. And if it works on Instagram, Pinterest is starting to look very Instagram-like-esque.
It's right? so funny that you said that too, because we're actually working with a couple of clients where we're using a lot of the same imagery on one channel and putting it on Pinterest just to keep that consistency in messaging and the fluidity of the user path, right?
For sure.
So,
absolutely. And I think, leveraging the video that you've got across all of these channels and then repurposing it so that it's relevant. So one of our sites that we own, mamaknows.com, we have a ton of images. The one image itself has over 1.2 million referrals from Pinterest, and it's probably like 4 or 5 years old. But that's solid, and it spikes whenever that image gets to the top of people's boards and people's feeds. It stays there, and it drives a ton of really quality traffic. People looking for content. And do the same thing with your videos, whether you're making tasties or whether you're making short, just snackable videos for social.
I love tasties.
Yes.
I don't know. I'm like a cat with catnip. I'm like, I could just like watch that all day.
It is the best. It is the best way to cook, like to see a recipe come together. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. Moving right along.
Some of these articles really zoomed in here, so just give me a sec. All right, we're up here. So Facebook is starting to incorporate some new tools for their content creators and featuring some more monetization content. So it's kind of like what YouTube's doing right now with their live streaming services, except now there's going to be new placement options and regions for video ads, which is really cool here. And they kind of show the differences between what they're kind of rolling right now. So you have your image had here, and then you also have a little bit of a pre-roll that you can see right here.
Yep.
And then for Facebook Live too, they're starting to offer subscriptions, kind of like a Twitch subscription or things like that, recurring subscriptions to some of your top content creators. And they're also offering I guess you could say incentives and private groups or private content for your subscribers on the Facebook page, which is cool. So it's kind of like incorporating Patreon in some respects.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
This is doing two things. One, it's these additional formats. Content creators can only go so far if they're not making money, right? And that's a big problem and a big issue for a lot of, especially media-driven brands.
Especially right now with demonetization too, right?
Well, that's it, right? So they're all fighting for new ways for content creators to make additional revenue without destroying the experience, and that's what Facebook is working on here. From an advertiser's perspective, when you have these new and interesting ways to place a video more than just pre-roll, mid-roll, right? You have an interesting ability from an advertising perspective to reach your content, your audience, by finding related influencers who are leveraging the monetization, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you have an influencer in the food space, and let's say I'm Great Lakes Goat Dairy and I sell goat cheese, right? Well, I could find celebrity chefs or tasty videos or, people that talk about health and wellness for lactose intolerance, that kind of thing. And I can really target the placements very specifically. So kind of, why are you guys talking about content creators and media companies? Well, all of these things affect the advertisers because, technically we're the ones monetizing their content and adding them, giving them the revenue. So one of the interesting things from a marketer's perspective is finding a series of influencers on Facebook and targeting your ads for placement on their pages and on their channels can be a really, really highly effective way to really reach the right audience. And it's actually, in a sense, it simplifies your targeting.
Yeah.
Right?
It also adds a level of social proof, too, because if you have an influencer who has X amount of followers and they're now sharing your content, or you're partnering with them, I mean, it's almost like they're becoming brand advocates, and all these people that believed in that influencer are now like, oh, hey, I've never heard of Great Lakes Goat Dairy. I want to try that out. That looks really interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think this is interesting, like the driving revenue with brand collaborations. So typically what we had to do in the past was, send out a bunch of emails to a bunch of people, negotiate and say, hey, we'd really like to work together. This is also another step, and Instagram is doing this as well, of giving tools to brands to connect with influencers so you can get real metrics, so you can see if the collaboration is working out, if and in a lot of ways these collaborations are really great, especially for micro influencers or smaller influencers, not necessarily micro, but not necessarily Jamie Oliver, right? Because he's going to get millions and millions, or Gordon Ramsay or somebody, and they're going to charge a fortune. But you could have a cooking, barbecuing influencer, right? And by advertising on the channel as well as being featured in the content of the channel, I think that's like a win-win situation for smaller budgets that aren't in the millions of dollars.
I have a question for you.
Oh.
Do you think it might, like, playing devil's advocate, do you think it takes away from the authenticity if it says, Joe Smith is sponsored by X brand for this post? Or do you think it adds a level of authenticity because now there's full transparency?
Well, I think it's all in how you deliver it, right?
Yeah.
If it's a poor delivery, it's going to look faked and forced. But for example, if you're going to do a brand collaboration and you're really working with that influencer and you send them, a box of the product and they're actually cooking with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's you're advertising on it, and the placements within the actual live stream or the video can make it genuine. So I think really what it comes down to is plainly just, instead of saying like, what movie did they do this? And Wayne's World, right?
Yeah.
I enjoy my Pepsi. You know, and making fun of that kind of thing. Then it's not going to be genuine. But in the sense that if it's done properly, positioned properly, and if your videos that you're potentially running on that channel, right, all the time, for example, for Facebook, the ideal is to use content and social proof and real social proof, like real people. This is whatever, right? This is Donna from Kentucky.
Exactly.
And show her picture, and maybe Donna's like, she's a fan of your page or something.
That's why I love product reviews.
Yeah.
Because we didn't ask for it. They willingly, took time out of their day to let us know. So it's the same kind of thing. Yeah. That's the way I feel too. I just wondered what your stance was on that, because I've read on both sides of the coin with this, that some people are arguing that it's going to affect authenticity. So
yeah, well, the tools don't affect the authenticity. Like a crappy message is a crappy message, right? And it has been for like forever. It doesn't really matter. It is in how you do it. And look, product placements are literally in like movies drive revenue, serious revenue by product placements. Some movies you'll see they only use Apple computers, and some movies they only use Windows Surface devices, and some are only like, let me check my phone. Right?
I'm using my computer.
So I think it is about authenticity, and I think it really truly is about creating an audience that you connect with, and how you connect with them being very genuine about that connection. Right? And that's why I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. One of our clients who's in the dental space was wondering, what do you think the reasons are that we were getting so many inbound leads, and a lot of them are organic? And he had 879 4.8 and above star reviews on Google Reviews.
That's fantastic.
Right? And that is just a ton of social proof. I'm going to look at that. If I see a dentist that has 9 reviews of 4.1, or I see a dentist that has 879 of 4.8, where are you going to go, right?
Exactly.
So I think this is just an important general part of marketing, which is, look, the tools of social media and the internet are nothing more than tools. People are the ones creating the content on those networks. The tool doesn't facilitate the message. The person behind it makes the message. So you have to the thing with social is you have to think a lot harder than I think you had to do 20 years ago in order to have a good message, right? Because people will say your stuff is garbage, or I don't really believe that. That's why you need that organic content in addition to the produced content in order so that they play off each other. Because if you're just looking like a pre-produced ad with nothing else behind it, you're going to have a much tougher go of it.
For sure.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
Right on, moving on. Google News. So Google, past couple of weeks, I think this is the 3rd time straight that Google's made a change on their site within 3 weeks. So Google News is officially launching new desktop results for the Google News design. Instead of congregated search results like you can see in the screen to the right here, everything's going to be kind of given their own card throughout the Google News search results. So this is going to affect you in 2 ways. If your story gets picked up by Google News and it's a top story, you're going to be showed in one of the featured cards on the screen here. But if it's not, unfortunately, you're going to lose some of the traffic to your articles. So it's a kind of win-lose here. Who's going to kind of get the top spots on Google News results?
When I was reading this, I was kind of thinking this was like an answer to fake news, because they're really, mentioning who the publisher is of said article, and trying to kind of.
For me, it's kind of, I like having a little bit of a congregated result when I'm looking for news stories. It kind of gives me an option to go through really quickly, skim each article to make sure things are kind of lining up if I want to kind of judge something. For me, I think this kind of makes it just a little bit more difficult to search for relative articles, like maybe scrolling through a couple pages.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely a fight against fake news, clustering. The question is what's the effect going to be for publishers, and how much control does a user have over what's being displayed? I'm personally not seeing it yet. I've got the older view, but we will, time will tell. I mean, I think what this is a lot of this is in advance of the upcoming elections, both in Canada and the United States, where
no doubt.
For sure.
That's going to be interesting.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, moving right along. Some more Google redesigns.
Yes. And then Twitter. So Canadians are actually getting a foot in the door here for testing some new Twitter features. Twitter is going to be allowing people in the future, they're going to see how their test works, but they're going to allow people to hide replies to your tweets. So this is very interesting. I know Twitter, the Twitter sphere has been asking for an edit button or like a reply or a hide replies feature for a while. So this is just going to be something that they're testing, and specifically Canadians are going to be able to start testing this feature right away. So I've checked my Twitter recently. I don't have the feature yet, but I think some people, it's available to very few select people right now, which is cool.
Yeah, that's going to be good for... they were saying that some people are going to be like, oh, censorship. But the other part is, it's going to be able to control the number of trolls that are actually commenting and maybe taking the conversation in a way that you didn't want it to go.
Yeah.
So
this is a filtering thing, and I think it's probably good. I mean, the whole thing about social media censorship is there is no First Amendment on private companies. These are private companies. Whether they're public, they are companies. So they do control that censorship. Television's been censored since like day one.
Yeah.
Radio's been censored since day one. Yeah. So this is really kind of in a vast number of ways, this is really no different. And they make the call the way that they make the call. I would say one thing from a Twitter usage perspective is a few more features for. I understand why you can't edit a tweet, right?
Me too.
Because you could totally change the tone of a conversation.
Yeah.
Right. By simply editing that.
Trail back and stuff.
Yeah. But there's, Twitter's battling a lot of really interesting things in terms of free speech and the tools that they provide to people. And again, I think Facebook is going through this and Google's going through this. They're all going through. This is the social media channels growing up and gaining their legs and realizing that they need to think more deeply about the tools that are provided to people and what that means for people that interact.
Yeah, it kind of went from being like an entertainment piece to now it's like information and news, and it's almost like the social media is a teenager right now, and we're gonna eventually
well, it's got to. It's maturing, right? Yeah. It's totally maturing. And one of the things is that the social media channels are in danger of, like the social media giants, right, including Google, and with that, are in danger of being broken up because of the level of control that they have over information and how they're consolidating things. So adding these tools is both a reaction to not wanting that to happen. They don't want that to happen. But just as a general rule, in 10 years, social media is going to look completely different than it does today.
Oh, 100%.
And I guess one of the things about social is, if I told you, I stole this line from somebody, I'm not going to say who. But if 100 years ago you had the money and you could buy up all the beachfront property in Malibu Beach in Los Angeles because it wasn't valuable to anybody at that time, would you have done it?
I don't know.
Well, of course you would. The answer should be yes.
I don't
of course you would. Of course, you have the money.
Okay, I have the money, then yes, okay.
But 100 years ago, when that land was not valuable at all,
you would have got it first.
Then you would have got it. And how much would it be worth now?
Oh.
You can view your social presence and how much effort you put into that and how genuine it is as the same analogy, because in 10 years, you're not going to be able to do it that way. So if you can build up those followers and build up that community around it, it's going to pay huge dividends, right? So just something to think about in terms of, I know we're talking about one other feature, but it kind of leads to a bigger discussion.
I was just laughing because Matt and I were sitting here when you asked us that question, and I could tell we were both doing the math.
Mental math quickly going through our heads.
On a Friday afternoon.
Okay, so 100 years ago, if you had a bit of money, you could have driven up to Muskoka and bought up Joe Lake.
Yeah, that would have been quite the deal.
Yeah.
Because now it's now.
I would love a cottage up there.
Shoulda, woulda, coulda, guys. Shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Lake Joe is pretty, but it's really rocky.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's all rock.
Yeah. But that's part of the charm too.
It is part of the Muskoka charm.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Cool.
All right.
What's working?
What is working?
So this week we've been kind of going over quite a number of ways that we optimize, streamline, and also scale our processes, our QA processes, but also some of the marketing and social media plans that strategies that we use at the Hive.
Yeah, and I think the really important thing about this for anybody in any business, it doesn't matter what you do, is process is the distinctive thing between success and failure.
For sure.
If you don't have a process, it's going to be like a 4-year-old hockey game. Have you guys ever seen a 4-year-old hocky game? Like with 4-year-olds?
Like the Timbits? Like the Timbit
Yeah,
hockey?
Timbits.
Oh.
Yeah,
4-year-old. How about I coached 4-year-old soccer last week.
Yeah, 4-year-old
You know what
soccer.
happens? There's like 4 kids over there picking dandelions. 1 kid is crying over there. There's 1 kid that's racing up and down scoring goals. 2 of them are sitting on the side drinking water, and 1 wants to go home. That's a 3-year-old soccer game.
That's a
For sure.
pretty accurate description.
Yeah. And so what ends up happening with that in terms of processes and checklists. So all of the most important professions and ones that like people's lives are at stakes.
Yep.
Airline pilots have a pre-flight checklist that they have to conduct every single time. Doctors have a checklist for everything before any surgery, right? If you work at, well, I shouldn't talk about Boeing, I guess, right now, but necessarily. But if you're at NASA, everything is a checklist, right?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting how other businesses and industries maybe don't embrace checklists as much because they're really important. And they're not there because anybody is incompetent. Yeah. They're there because there's a million details in everything that's done, and it's really, really deceiving. Right?
Yep. Yeah, and I think you kind of, it's really great to break it down because when you don't, you realize how many little steps that you do take. You just, when you go through the motions every day, you're bound to forget to relay those other steps.
Yeah, and
right?
I think it's good
so
too. I mean, I think strategies come and go. A strategy that you might have used 2 years ago might be relevant again, just with the way that algorithms change. I know that with some of the social media stuff we've done previous months, we've gone back to almost like 2 years worth of work and some strategies that we used when we were had some a little bit more heavy social media clients, you know what I mean? And we're starting to revise those strategies and bring them up, and it's great to have those little checklists where it's just step 1 and it might even be like type something in the URL, you know what I mean? But it's excellent to kind of have the strategy that goes through that point, right?
So the processes are all about being efficient so that when we go through, and maybe you can pull up Manifestly, Matt. That might be useful. Okay. So this is the tool that we use.
Should I have the, like, we're signed in and everything like that. You want me to pull that up, or?
Yeah, there's nothing.
I can show a live the Hive workflow list.
Sure. I think this is pretty generic. It's fine. Let's go into the workflows though. And then show the live at the Hive checklist. That's cool. So what this is a platform for checklists that we use that allow us to create a workflow and then create a run which has a date and people assigned to it, so that every time something happens, we run the checklist. And then even if it's somebody that's newer to the team, maybe Stacy's on vacation and yes, she's doing this type of email campaign and she's really used to it, but somebody else has to jump in. And I think everybody here can attest to it is incredibly deceiving when you're running, say, an e-commerce campaign, a 48-hour flash sale, how many details there are. Yes. Yeah. They're endless. We have some like 80 and 90 step checklist, the things that you have to check, and they're all the little things.
This is a very little one, the 6-step live at the Hive one, but it gets way more in depth than this. This is a quick one that we set up, but it's everything from like headings, the QA, to titles, subject lines, how to send, how to schedule, and even screenshots too. I know a lot of times we include screenshots in our processes, just kind of make things a little bit more clear.
When we were talking about this earlier this week, I just thought of this. Dan made a really good point, because maybe sometimes you've been the one writing the blog, or you've been the one writing the email, and you've looked at it upside down, sideways. But because you've been looking at it for too long, to have somebody else look it over is fantastic, because you're going to miss things.
Yeah, you should never QA your own work.
Yeah.
You should proof your own work, and at a certain point say, I feel good about this, and I can hand it off to somebody else. That outside view, if I'm reviewing something that somebody else has done, or someone's reviewing something that I've done, I may be missing something completely obvious that I don't realize, because I'm staring at it for so long.
I have one up right now. It's the creating Instagram feed videos. And this is just a little bit of an example of how in-depth that they can get, to a point where you're actually creating headings with subsections of the tasks. So one would be preparing your content video clips, and it would go down to about 5 steps in order to do that. Then the next would be creating closed captions, setting up your creative, Final Cut Pro project setup, and it just kind of goes through A, B, like, you know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely. And again, I think, so this is a tool. There's a few other tools out there like this, but we find this one to be, both cost effective and effective in terms of using it. And again, the other thing about when you create a checklist for a process or for whatever it is that you're doing, the way that it's a litmus test to see if it's effective is give it to somebody that's never done it before.
Yep.
Yeah.
If they can't do it,
Checklist isn't good.
Then the checklist needs work.
Yeah.
But that's like invaluable feedback.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So get someone else, potentially even somebody that, isn't in your field, right? Someone that's just, because you should be able to explain a lot of that stuff to them, right?
Yep.
And so the whole idea and concept of checklists, it sounds like a minor subject, but literally it, I think, is the difference between success and failure. And if you have a checklist, I think your odds of being successful are much higher, because people are not guessing what comes next. It's not in somebody's head, right? And it very much leads to success, because you won't miss it. And you also have a record of it.
Yeah.
Right? You have a record of things that happen, and these things get refined. And when you increase the efficiency of your workflow, so whether you own an e-commerce store, whether you are a solo digital marketer, whether you're a marketing manager, an email marketing manager, whatever it might be, if you can make your work more efficient, and this is something we talk about here a lot too, the more efficient you can make your life, the happier you're going to be, because the easier your life is going to be.
Truly.
It's not going to be as hard as it seems.
Yeah.
Right? Things like CTA libraries and brand guidelines and examples, and having a library of calls to actions and subject headlines. That's all stuff that you can just go dive into, pull out, and you have a starting point to work from.
For sure.
Right? And so I think, the important thing is to identify what processes you may have that are not in place, and then put them in place. Right?
Yep.
And I think this is pretty common with a lot of people. We do A, B, C, D, E, F, G things, and they all work out great. And then we have this other trouble with H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O. And it's a disaster. And I have a terrible day, and I go home and I'm frustrated. And my manager got mad at me, and the client was mad. And then it was just because there was no process. That is that's the whole thing behind it, right? So there's a book called The Checklist Manifesto, which is one of my favorite books. As simple as it sounds, it's actually a pretty big topic. Highly, highly recommended read in terms of being efficient. Tim Ferriss talks a lot about that same thing in the 4-Hour Work Week. Is like, what are the things that you're doing today that take you the most time?
Yeah.
Because they'll typically be mundane things.
Yep.
And what we try to do is, if we say, hey, okay, Stacy, what are the 5 most mundane things that take you the most time? Can we find somebody on the team, maybe a junior, because you're doing it so much, you're obviously could rattle it off. Let's find somebody or add a team member that can do that. And that frees you up. Right, Nira? Nira likes to hold on to things. But we're working on it.
You can't build a house on a leaky foundation.
No.
Right?
That's right.
That is right.
That's right. All right.
Cool.
Hannah says, I need efficient tool checklist for laundry. Listen, I've got 6 people in my house. That laundry machine never, it's just going all the time.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
I only have 3, but I have a teenage girl. So she's like 4 people.
Yes. On that note, everybody, it is now 4:59. We are exactly on schedule.
Right on.
Have
Love
a-
it.
Sorry.
Yeah, Stace. Be
I
safe.
think,
Have fun.
I think it's good to be excited to be on vacation. There's nothing wrong with that. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week for episode 87.
87.
And Stacy won't be here.
Nope.
She will be
I'm
off
going to be up north.
the grid. All right,
will.
everybody.
See
Have
you.
a
Take it
great
easy.
weekend.